Good afternoon, everybody. James Abrenio here on this episode of JamesPod. Today, got a special guest, Claire Gastanaga, and it should be in with the Inye. So, Claire, I really appreciate you joining today.
Well, I'm happy to be here. It's a lot of fun to have a conversation with somebody who's as well informed as you are.
Well, I'm not as well informed, but having folks like you on here, that's the goal, is to try to get informed, and maybe for the 10 people watching this, they can get some information too. So, Uh, I would suspect that most people watching this know you. Your reputation precedes you, but the 2 points that I think are really relevant here is you were the former director of the ACLU of Virginia, great
Mhm.
organization.
Yeah.
Anybody watching, go ahead and contribute, join, help. But you were also a pretty long time former chief deputy attorney general, and I have the years 1986 to 1994. Is that right?
Yeah, I was a deputy and then chief deputy my last year in the office. So I was in the office for 8 years. And during that
Okay.
8 years, I was the hiring partner for, even then, it was one of the larger, if not the largest law firm in Virginia. And
Yeah.
back then it was only 256 people, but now
Okay.
it's up to more like 700 or something.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So you know that office
Hmm.
obviously well.
Yeah.
I'd been thinking about talking to you for a while, but I knew that I had to make the call, or text or email, however I reached out to you. When I saw you do an op-ed in one of my favorite online magazines, Cardinal News. So the
Yeah.
first question I had is, how did you know about Cardinal, and what made you choose to pick them to do your op-ed in?
Well, I mean, I love Cardinal News and Virginia Mercury and
Mm,
all the folks, the Richmonder, all the folks doing real news, nonprofit
mm,
today, so that they're not subject to the constraints of organized corporate media. And um, I knew Dwayne Yancey well when he was at the Roanoke paper.
okay.
I've
Yeah.
been around long enough. I laugh. I say I've been around long enough that Peter Baker at the New York Times was
Mm,
a cub reporter in the Richmond doing covering the General Assembly
yeah.
on behalf of I think the Washington Post, and
Yeah.
known Anita Kumar, who's now at Axios, through that same thing, and Mike Allen, who formed Axios. So I kind of have been around long enough that I know a lot of the old hands, and so Dwayne Yancey and the folks who did the Mercury and the folks who were trying to get the Richmonder up and running, they're all
Yeah.
people I've dealt with and respected in the media for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah, and if they happen to watch this, they're rock stars in my nerd world. So
Yeah, me
I'm
too.
loving the work they're doing.
Yeah.
So your article, "Choosing the People's Lawyer: November's Most Important Choice." Uh, uh, Sorry, I messed up the name, but you're talking about the Attorney General's race, and essentially what you're
Right.
saying is the Attorney General's race is so important. Why do you think it's the most important race, if you do, that we need to be paying attention
Well, I mean, this is a piece that I've been writing. This is my 20th anniversary version of this. I
to?
think I wrote the very first one in my blog, my Change Servant blog, back in 2005.
Okay.
And it's always been something I care deeply about because, what people don't understand is, other than the governor,
Mhm.
the attorney general has the broadest portfolio of any official. I mean, it's the same in a corporation. The general counsel and the president both have,
Mhm.
the broadest possible portfolio. They oversee everything, and the AG, as counsel to the state government,
Mhm.
has the same scope or span of vision that the governor has.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, I mean, I'll give you a great example. When we were in the AG's office, there were coming up through different chains some air pollution concerns about a place, some
Mhm.
water concerns about a place, uh, some soil and ground contamination. And at that time, they were all in separate agencies, and there wasn't a DEQ, and there wasn't anything that brought them up together. And no one except the AG's office could put all those things together and go to the governor and say, hey, oh, there was also three workers had died there. So there was
Mhm.
also a worker hazard situation. And so we went to the governor and said, Governor, look, we can see all these things, and somebody needs to get a handle on
Mhm.
what's
Mhm.
happening up there. And it ended up being a plant we shut down.
Wow.
it is remarkable the span that the AG's office has, and then added to that is no one else is charged by the code to protect Virginia consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And so while individual Commonwealth's attorneys can prosecute deceptive advertising and some things under the Consumer Protection Act, the only person who can represent the consumer in utility rate regulation, insurance rate regulation, all those things that go on at the State Corporation Commission is the Attorney General.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the Medicaid fraud unit that is looking at all the things that are going on there. So, I get frustrated when people talk about the AG as if the AG is a prosecutor, because the Attorney General of Virginia does have some very limited prosecutorial authority, but our Constitution accords the principal responsibility for criminal prosecution to independent constitutional officers called Commonwealth's attorneys. And even where the AG has been given some direct prosecutorial authority outside of, he can or she can prosecute a theft of government property and things that are directly related to the state. There's some other places like pornography that go across jurisdictions and are particularly complicated, where the AG has been given some authority. But even there, the authority is dependent upon working with the Commonwealth's attorney, who is the principal prosecutor, charged by our Constitution to represent us in criminal cases. And so it is always frustrating to me when people run as if that's who the AG is, and particularly given the scope and span of the AG's responsibilities and how much. I mean, when I was in the Attorney General's office, I worked on education matters, I worked on child support enforcement, I worked on all kinds of human resources issues, environmental issues, and it just is. It is the people's lawyer, and you need to think about that job as if you're hiring a lawyer to represent you, and you are.
So you wouldn't agree with the Miyares' characterization of being Virginia's top cop?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that's a fallacy they've worked because some poll told them that it was a winning argument. And unfortunately, I think because it's hard for people to understand what the job's real role is, simplifying it that way and making it sound as if that's your major responsibility is a sales pitch.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I do a lot of civil work now. It's mostly personal injury, but my background is really criminal defense. And what really, before Trump, I was really pretty apolitical. I studied, government in college, just interested kind of from a wonky standpoint. Trump wins, and then we have this amazing push for a criminal justice reform here in Virginia, which I just never would have thought happened. So I started thinking, wow, there's really some good that can be done at a local level. And then Miyares wins. And one of the things, talking about the AG's office, that I was really offended by, as soon as he comes in, he essentially replaces a unit that Herring created in order to look at wrongful convictions with a it was a conviction integrity unit. He changed it to election integrity unit. Obviously writing off Trump's whole, election was rigged kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely want to get to the civil side of things, but I'm interested in criminal justice reform. What when you saw that happening, what were you thinking? What was your view on it? Did you have anything you wanted to add from your perspective?
Well, let's back up and look at the bigger picture for a minute. When we were in the AG's office, out of the 250 some odd people in the office, about 14 were political appointees.
Okay.
Yeah. Very small fraction. Top of the, the chief deputy, the key deputies, the chief administrative officer, and a couple of people who led the legislative work that we did. But for the most part, I mean, my secretary, when I got to the AG's office, had been Marshall Coleman, a Republican Attorney General's personal secretary. And when Marshall left, she was moved down in the organization. And she took up a position as the chief assistant to the deputy of my division, right, which has been me. A person who had been a deputy under the prior AG moved down to be a senior assistant attorney general. There was a lot of that kind of reabsorption of
Sure.
people into the organization. Contrast that with Jim Gilmore's first act as attorney general when he was elected in '93 was to write us and say anybody we hired between the election and when we left office in January would be fired immediately when he came in. And then add to that he at one and the same time had his people invite people to fundraisers for him while they were also telling him that every single person in the office had to reapply for their jobs, down to the guy that shepherded the mail around in a cart, because the attorney general's people they are not protected by civil service. They all serve at the pleasure of the AG. And he literally interviewed everybody and made them reapply for their jobs. And one person who we had made an acting deputy because one of our deputies left got fired rather than move back into the job that she was actually in.
Sure.
And so that kind of started a whole chain of future events. And if you looked now, the political appointments go way down into the organization and the professionalism, and the same thing's happening with the federal government. Just happened in the AG's office a while ago. And so as a consequence of that, instead of you seeing cases in which from a lawyer's perspective it's kind of poised, a quarter poised on the edge, and it could go either way depending on the way you want to see it or argue it. So that would be the political decision, like do you flop the quarter this way or that way? Now wholesale, the whole office, I mean, he's writing letters to the American Bar Association saying that they should change the accreditation standards for law schools because they incorporated DEI things that he thought were wrong. I mean, what is the Virginia AG doing that? I mean, it's so off the charts in terms of the job they're supposed to be doing. So there's those big shifts, and the office has become, it was always sort of seen as potentially a political stepping stone, although very few people actually stepped up. Most of them got stepped down. I think Jared Beliles was the last person who went from AG to governor, but they're not for people. I mean, Gilmore did too. So and so did McDonald. So there were a bunch of them, but not just
I still see Mark early around Loudon Courthouse.
But not just a political stepping stone, but a political operation.
Sure.
And as opposed to a true, sort of law firm. Now, is the AG's office different from a traditional law firm? Yes, because the reality is there's one lawyer. The Constitution and the statutes of Virginia say that a lawyer represents the Commonwealth of Virginia and provides advice to the Commonwealth, and that one lawyer can act through assistants. But it's not like a law firm where there are kind of separate conduits, through lawyers, that sort of are collaborative, but literally there's one lawyer. And that's why when we were in the office, we got some of the rules changed in terms of how statutes changed in terms of what would traditionally be seen as conflicts of interest, because the one lawyer can't have the one lawyer has to be able to represent the Department of Transportation and George Mason when there's a right-of-way issue, right? And so we and one lawyer is advising the board that's making a regulatory decision, and another lawyer is helping advocate a position. And in traditional thinking about lawyering, that would potentially be a conflict, but you couldn't have that because that would mean the AG couldn't do their job.
Sure.
So it is different from law firms in that respect, but it's also the same in the sense that their role should be clearly one in which ethics and honesty rather than politics guide most of the decision making. And you used to have a cadre of professionals for whom you could, pretty much count on that they were giving you their best legal opinion, not a politically informed argument.
Yeah. And it's frustrating to see one of the things that I always hoped is, across the river here in Virginia, you wouldn't see kind of the nationalization of our technical offices,
Mhm.
lawyer offices, and it just, I was going to go through a list of cases here on the criminal side, but I think we all kind of know where that's going. Uh, I I did want to have you because you mentioned the State Corporation Commission, and I think
Mhm.
a lot of people don't really understand what that is and how it interacts with the AG's office. Can you just give us kind of a 101? What is the State
Yeah.
Corporation Commission and how
The
does that work?
State Corporation Commission is kind of a fourth branch of government in Virginia. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got the legislative, the executive, the judiciary, and then you have this other judiciary, which
Mhm,
is the State Corporation Commission are appointed. They're judges. They're
mhm,
considered to be judges,
mhm,
and they run the commission that includes the agencies that regulate insurance in
mhm,
Virginia, for
mhm,
example, regulate the utilities,
mhm,
all of the services um, that go to telephones, the power company, insurance. When we were in the AG's office, we had there was a time when there was a crisis in liability insurance premiums,
mhm,
and we actively not only sought changes in the law before
mhm,
the General Assembly to better even the playing field for consumers and insurance companies, but we also argued in rate cases where they were trying to get an increase in the workers' comp rates or the general liability rates. We would argue against those rate increases
mhm,
because we didn't think they were um, well founded based on the kinds of standards like costs and things
mhm,
that normally should go into making those decisions. And Dominion Power has used its power,
mhm,
political power, to cut back on the State Corporations Commission's ability to tell it what to do, rate
mhm,
wise and otherwise. So it really is the place where the people's interest is supposed to be represented by the AG's office. They, in terms of rates and terms of insurance and all of those things that go into for businesses and for individuals
mhm.
are important and can be important. So there are three commissioners
Yeah.
in the State Corporation Commission. Like other judges, they're appointed by an election in the General Assembly,
Mhm,
and there's usually an effort to try to have a balance in that group between pro business and pro consumer kinds of people
mhm,
in the commissioners' jobs. But that's been sort of here and there over
mhm,
time.
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, in your article, in posing what questions folks should be
Mhm.
asking, you said, "What impact will campaign contributions have on their
Yeah.
actions?" What did you mean by that?
Well, if you get a lot of money from a regulated utility when you're running for election, uh, part of our whole system is grounded in the idea
Mm,
that if we disclose contributions, voters can make informed choices
mm,
about whether they should vote for this person or that person. That we don't have any. I call Virginia the Cayman Islands of campaign finance.
yeah,
We don't have any prohibitions on corporate donations. Many
yeah,
states don't allow corporations
mm,
to make political contributions to their candidates. We don't have any limit.
mhm,
Some states have you can't give more than X, and
mhm,
there's limits on federal contributions. We don't have any limits.
mhm,
So any person or company can give as much money as they want to try to influence an election.
mhm,
And our job as voters is to know who's given to whom and whether that causes us to have some concern about whether they'll do the job the
mhm,
way you want them to do it. So
mhm,
if I'm looking at VPAP, Virginia Public Access Project, and I'm looking at contributions and I see big contributions from regulated industries to the AG, I'm worrying whether he or she is going to be a good consumer representative if
yeah.
they feel that they owe something to the people that helped them get there.
And we're kind of beating around the bush a little bit here in that
Mhm.
Dominion, obviously, it seems through the money, seems to have a preference here.
Sure.
Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, Dominion votes. Well, actually, it's sort of interesting.
Yeah,
If you watch Dominion over the years, you'll see that they give on both sides of the aisle, and they tend
yeah,
to try to cover all their bets. They're not.
yeah.
They would. they would often say to me, Claire, we're completely bipartisan. We give to everybody, right?
We buy
And
favors on both sides, you know.
and at some level, they do. Although
I
there
mean,
are
it's smart
obviously
business, you know. I'm not gonna, you know.
they're not the only ones. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
if you look at Aetna and you look at State Farm and you look at USAA, it doesn't
yeah,
matter who the insurer is.
yeah,
You can see, you can follow the money,
yeah.
and Dominion has more money than
Mhm,
some other business entities, and they
mhm,
spend more of it on elections than
mhm,
many other business entities, and they tend to spend. While they might spend on both sides, they tend to spend more on people that they think are going to be um, listen more carefully to their arguments about
mhm,
why things should or shouldn't happen that affect their regulated industry. So and you've got countervailing, you've got Clean Virginia, you've got Michael Bills in Clean Virginia who are busy giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to people who
mhm,
aren't taking Dominion money. So
mhm,
there's money on both sides. I used to say to candidates when I was advising candidates, they'd say, "Well, where should I be on gambling?" And I'd say, "Well, you have to pick the ponies or the casinos because there's money on both sides,
yeah, yeah,
and you can't serve both interests.
yeah,
Think about where you want to be, or you want to, or maybe you don't take any money because you don't believe in gambling. But
yeah,
the reality is there's almost always somebody who will fund somebody based
mhm,
on trying to get what they want to have happen. It's a situation in which there was an independent woman business owner who gave $500,000 to Tim Kaine
mhm,
when he was running for governor, and then turned around and supported the Republican opposition to a future gubernatorial candidate because she didn't get the answer she wanted on right to work.
mm, okay.
And then there's my all-time favorite, which is Patricia Cornwell, who was a crime author and was here in Richmond for a
Yeah,
long
yeah,
time, and wanted very much for Mary C. Terry to. I wasn't ever quite sure what she wanted from Mary C. Terry, but she didn't get it. So
yeah,
the next thing we knew, when Mary C. Terry was running against George Allen for governor, was
mhm.
Patricia Cornwell was making an ad, giving George $50,000 and making an ad that's saying, "Yes, we need a woman governor, but not this woman, not now."
Well, a little known story. My dad used to be a forensic pathologist in Richmond,
Ah,
and he would talk about Patricia Cornwell because she
oh,
would come and observe,
oh yeah.
autopsies and things for her stories. I didn't know this though. I didn't know she was
There were
politically active.
always some real question about whether that was entirely kosher.
And
Um,
as I sit here talking about it, I'm pleading the fifth for my dad. So,
no, well, wasn't your dad making the decisions? There was a medical examiner who was making those decisions. In fact, they all got sued at one point by the parents of the two young people that were killed on the Parkway in
wow,
Williamsburg,
wow,
because she was given, let's just say, amazing access to records which might otherwise not have been readily available.
yeah, I'm gonna
And
have to edit this portion out of this broadcast.
probably so. I've been very careful to state opinions and no facts here because,
Oh my goodness! All right,
yeah,
James, don't overshare. This is why they keep
yeah.
telling me. Um,
James, that's why they have the edit button.
um, so one of the other roles, and is on the consumer protection side. Let me ask you this: What
Mhm.
is? I asked you before we jumped on here. I am not a fan of Mures. I'm a huge J. Jones fan. I think it's pretty well known, kind of where you're viewing this.
Yep.
What is your view on Mieres's job as the consumer attorney? What
Well,
he's
see,
done?
he's not doing it. I mean,
Okay,
and that's the thing. And he's not alone.
sure.
It has always been surprising to me how issues that get AGs elected in other states are not platforms for people running for AG in Virginia.
Mhm,
I'll give you some examples. There are people who've been elected attorneys general fundamentally on prohibiting elder abuse
mhm.
and making sure that people in nursing homes get healthy, good treatment,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Which you
Yeah.
can prosecute
It
under the Medicaid fraud, or you
yeah.
can go after it under elder abuse. There are all kinds of different ways. There are people who've gotten elected AG on a consumer protection argument, that I'm the one who's going out there and make sure that you're not going to be victimized by deceptive advertising. You're not going to be victimized by unfair rates and all these things, all of which our AGs could do, but don't choose to. And it's partly, I think, a function of the reality of how our election financing goes, because in the states I'm talking about, they don't have the same wild west of corporations being able to make huge contributions that influence these. So our attorneys general races look differently sometime than others, but RAG could be really doing aggressive Medicaid fraud investigations and quality of care in nursing homes under a variety of different banners. And for the most part, RAGs have not done that. The RAGs are the principal advocates for consumer protection generally. Antitrust used to be a really, really high functioning antitrust section in the office, which is kind of atrophied over time. So there isn't anything that you can think of that an attorney general couldn't do that RAG can't do. It's just they choose not to.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that angle before. So I guess that begs two questions from me. Number one is, when you say it's because of the money and the influence, is it because businesses are going to be impacted, the candidates are wanting to avoid that issue and talk about crime? And number two, do you think it's politically smart? And when I think about smart, I'm talking about, how do Democrats win more elections?
Well, I mean, I would love to, I would love to say that I think that you could really differentiate yourself as a candidate for attorney general by really upping the conversation about the consumer role of the AG, and being the people's lawyer and doing all those things. And I personally believe in my heart that you could make that work. It would be something where you would have to see it as pretty much a small dollar campaign. It's kind of like the old Henry Howell, campaign, where he wasn't going to be beholden to anybody, including Dominion. But there are just all these forces at work that make it really hard for people to accept that. And so they poll, and polling has so much to do with how people end up talking about stuff. And they poll, I think, only about certain things, rather than really trying to open up the conversation and see whether other things would be compelling. For example, Jay Jones, who I personally adore and I am supporting.
I'm a big fan.
Big fan. I was big fan of his dad's, and I was a supporter of Jay's in the first primary that he lost, and I haven't walked away. But we transferred the civil rights enforcement to the Attorney General's office some years ago, and I expressed some really significant concern about that at the time, because I really thought it should be an independent agency.
Interesting. Okay.
And that concern played out realistically when Meares took over, because he basically gutted the section, and people can't even get a right to sue letter, and we had to change the law so they could get a right to sue letter, so they could go to court and vindicate their own case, which shouldn't have been necessary. And he just, so what progress we'd made toward making the Virginia Human Rights Act an actual functioning civil rights law completely eviscerated when Meares went in. And that's a problem. And back in 2000, Viola Baskerville, when she was a delegate, made a proposal to take the civil rights, what was then the Human Rights Council, and all the different little pieces of civil and human rights that were spread around, fair housing, disability, and put them together in one independent civil rights commission that was an independent agency with its own lawyers. Didn't get very far. I don't even think it got a hearing in committee. But I really have always believed that in Virginia, because of the way Virginia is structured, I mean, in New Jersey, the Civil Rights Division is a really big part of the AG, the New Jersey Attorney General's office. It has been and continues to be, a force for positive change. It has been that way through generations of attorneys general without there being this issue. But ours was, just recently moved there, and it, everybody go, oh, that's great. Mark Herring's going to be running it. Well, you know
Yeah.
what? Mark Herring is going to be AG forever.
Yeah.
And so it really, the minute Mary's went in, he gutted the fair housing group. He made a lot of decisions that sent the message that he didn't really care about ending discrimination against uh, people of color or women or people with disabilities.
Let me ask you this. So, and this is my ignorance, and I'm trying to learn the structure before. Who ran that office? How did they get appointed? And
It
what?
was a separate agency.
Sorry, agency, not
Yeah,
office.
the Virginia look. When the Virginia Human Rights Law was passed, which I think was 1996 or something. I mean, we were one of the last states in the nation with a freestanding civil rights law. Interesting. Not surprising, but interesting. Anyway, there was never I'd love to say differently, but there was never really an intent for it to be a meaningful agency. The idea was we're going to set it up. We're going to say we have Virginia Human Rights Council, but we're not going to give them any money. We're not going to give them any power. We're not going to give them any staff. We're certainly not going to give them any lawyers. The lawyering, to the extent that there was any, came out of the AG's office. And yet they managed somehow to get the EEOC to make them a deferral agency, even though they had really, there was no there. Okay. They were able to get to be a deferral agency, which under, Title VII means that when you file, the state agency has a certain period of time to resolve the complaint before you can get a right to sue letter or anything else. So it was a way of putting in place a statutory delay, if you will, in being able to vindicate your rights. So when it moved over to the AG's office, the idea was that was going to strengthen it, that was going to give it some real teeth, that AG was given enforcement authority to do some investigations and to bring actions. And, I mean, my cynical self said, yeah, well, that'll be fine as long as you have the right AG. But the minute you don't have the right AG, there's not going to be any civil rights enforcement in Virginia. And what we really need is an independent agency. And we still need an independent agency.
Let me ask you, and again, this is an ignorant question. And I've looked at a couple employment law cases over my entire career. One was since Meares was in office, and it looked like an issue for the exact reason you're talking about. But why is there even that deferral agency? Why can't you just go straight to the court? And is that a good thing?
The way that it's just the way the structure's always been set up. I mean, the structure's always assumed that under Title VII, that there's a benefit to voluntary resolution. And so the system's always set up to, have the agency have the ability to evaluate whether the agency, A, wants to stand behind your complaint and bring the force of the government, with it, or engage in, efforts to get a voluntary resolution. And then if those things fail, you have an automatic right to a right to sue letter. It's kind of exhausting your administrative remedies and classic lawyerese. And you can see some benefit to it because if you can get an informal resolution at the early stages, everybody benefits. I mean, theoretically. And I used to tell my clients when I was in-house in a corporation, if we didn't do anything wrong, we would just keep going until they take us to court and we'll win. If we did do something wrong, fix it. Now. Let's fix it now. Do whatever, right? But that's quite different from, say, for example, what's going on at the University of Virginia right now, where the federal government is essentially seeking to bully people in a circumstance in which there's an Administrative Process Act. They're are all kinds of procedures that are supposed to be followed before you can take somebody's federal funds away.
Mhm.
You're supposed to file a complaint. You're supposed to prove your case
Mhm,
in
mhm.
an administrative proceeding, and then only then could they be ordered to terminate the federal aid.
Mhm.
And the kinds of bullying and stuff they're doing with the colleges and universities and the private law firms to the same extent.
Yeah.
It's just I feel like I've gone through, a wormhole into an alternate legal universe.
I mean,
Yeah,
it
it
is
is Star Trek Day, right?
it is hard, and I want to stake on that in a moment, but
Yeah.
I spoke to a bunch of students, over the last year,
Mhm.
and, the thought of being in law school right now, I don't even know, first of all, how law professors teach constitutional law. I mean, you
Well,
know
today we've learned that you can't use race to give people a leg up in admissions when all things are equal, but you can use it to go throw them in jail, right?
Yeah. There was a
You
line,
can.
I think by Kavanaugh, I think, and, that essentially said, "Well, if an officer finds out that they arrested a US citizen, they should just, let him go." I'm like, "Okay."
Well, but my
Yeah,
husband's from Puerto Rico. My
yeah.
husband's from Puerto Rico. He has an accent, and he
Mm,
has a Hispanic surname.
yeah,
I begged him
mhm,
to carry his he has a he we have passport cards,
mm,
which you can get a card that you can use in lieu
sure.
of your book passport
Yeah,
for entry into federal buildings and all the things that you could use real ID for, except for getting on an airplane.
mhm,
And I said to him, you've got to carry it. You've
mhm,
got to carry it
yeah,
because we don't normally, as citizens, have to prove our citizenship.
yeah,
And yet it's quite clear now that if you have a Hispanic surname or you have an accent or you're working at a bodega, that you better damn well be able to prove your citizenship or they can arrest you just because of who you look, what you look like, or how you sound. I mean, that's outrage. That is not the America I grew up in.
and what it does is it even even if you are able to show that you're an American citizen, your civil rights have been violated right there.
Absolutely. Right
I
there.
I then wonder about 2 scenarios. One, let's say they say, "Show me your ID." The person pulls out their ID, and then, some paraphernalia or some drug drops out. Or number 2, they refuse, and then there's physical altercation. Like,
Well, I mean,
you know
legally, I mean, here's this is always the hard thing.
yeah,
Legally, you don't have to give a police person anything but your name.
sure. Yeah.
If you're asked your name, you're required. And if you are here and you came through our immigration system and you are visaed,
Mhm.
you're required to carry those papers with you. But an American citizen is not required to carry papers with them to prove their citizenship. I mean,
Mm.
that's what they did in South Africa.
Yeah.
That is not what we do here, although we're getting there.
We're getting there, yeah.
Um, and it's really tragic. But it is a we are in that circumstance where we now have police who believe they have been authorized by the Supreme Court to racially profile.
And they have. I mean, have they not? Am I reading that
Well,
wrong?
it hard to say. I mean, they
Yeah.
didn't they didn't issue an opinion. They just simply refused to entertain a case at this point in time and until it goes up through the appellate
Yeah.
chain.
Yeah.
So, I mean, theoretically you can argue all you want that as a pure legal matter they haven't authorized anything, but as a practical real matter, every
Yeah.
single police officer in America now thinks he's free to racially profile. And that is not a good thing.
I mean, as I think about it now, even let's say, let's give the law enforcement officer full credit and say he's there to
Mhm.
do good and he just wants to do his job or she. Um, you think about, well, what directive does that give you? I'm trying to do my job right. This opinion or this, refusal to issue an opinion or rebuff Trump. What am I obligated to do? And I think it don't not only says it affirmatively says you have to do that. I mean, that's what I will
Yeah, I
receive.
mean,
Maybe
I
I'm
think the real problem is that, you get somebody like I personally think our chief here in Richmond is trying to do the right thing. And
okay,
our chief here in Richmond believes that community policing is obviously dependent on people trusting and
sure.
believing that the local police are their friends and not their enemies.
Mm,
And he has been very careful not to engage his officers in direct immigration enforcement, civil immigration enforcement. And I think he would be telling his officers, we don't do that. That's not how we make decisions. We don't, probable cause is not what color they are or how they sound. It's certainly not that they happen to work at a bodega. But whether management can, I mean, when the rank and file hear that their managers are telling them that they can't do something they feel like they're legally able to do, I mean, I think it's really hard to lead in that circumstance, and to make sure that your particular department is operating in a way that is consistent with your values and principles, and the values and principles that we would hope all of our law enforcement would have, which is that their primary duty is to uphold the Constitution.
And I suspect as we go further and deeper into this, the federal administration is going to just have more incentive to push individual jurisdictions harder. Why aren't you affirmatively helping out? If you're not going to, I mean, you see it in Chicago, if you're not going to firmly help out, we're going to have to come in.
Yeah. I mean, we have a president who's essentially declared war on an American city. I mean, my father was in the Army for 39 years. He retired as a 4-star general.
Wow.
He gave a speech in 1979 about women, accommodating women and people of color in the federal civilian workforce in his command, and also in the military. And he said at the time that it was a moral obligation to ensure that everyone had an equal right to work for the federal government, to prosper, and to live happily ever after, if you will. I mean, and he said we don't do it because it's of the law. We do it because it's right. We do it because it's a moral imperative. And he spoke out against discriminatory troop companies in Fort Sill, Oklahoma in 1954, because Truman had desegregated the military in 43. So, I mean, I just think, I wish he were alive. I keep wondering what he would be saying. I think he and Mark Milley, both of whom graduated from Princeton ROTC, would probably be saying the same thing, which is, we don't take an oath to some guy. We take an oath to the Constitution. And what concerns me is we have military people who just killed 11 people in a boat because somebody told them they had drugs. I'm sorry. That's an act of war. We don't do that.
There are so many things happening on a daily basis that to survive from a mental health standpoint, you have to ignore 90% of them.
Yeah. And for me, obviously I'm privileged, right? But I am the matriarch of a family of 32 that includes my husband, who's from Puerto Rico, my niece and 2 nephews who are half Chinese, my Chinese Hawaiian sister-in-law, my lesbian niece, my autistic savant brother. I mean, I have this group of people who I have my arms around metaphorically, and sometimes not often enough physically, who are impacted by this every day.
Yeah.
And it is, I don't know how we can, I used to think I had ideas about solutions. And at this stage, all I can say is you all darn well better vote in November, because we need to be sure that we have statewide elected officials in Virginia who will stand up against this stuff and who will say it's a war crime to kill 11 people in a boat with no evidence or anything other than a suspicion that they might have drugs, or that we are arresting 475 South Koreans in a plant in a southern state because some woman said they were illegal. I mean, it just is appalling to me. And then to have, and to have police unleashed, to have a guy who has white supremacist, white Christian nationalist tattoos leading our Defense Department, is sending him, my father used to talk about how hard they work to ensure that people coming into the military understood their duty, honor, and their duty and honor was to country, and to the Constitution. And we had people sending messages to the people who are carrying arms in our streets that that's not their job anymore. Their job is to do what a person says they're supposed to do. And
Well, and we could talk about this obviously for days,
mhm,
but we're here to talk about the Virginia Attorney General. Let me
yeah,
ask you
and
this, we're seeing what's happened at UVA now, George Mason. You even saw,
well, the attorney general theoretically represents those institutions. The
so my
attorney
question is,
general,
what should he be?
ethically should
Yeah.
be a zealous representative of those institutions. That
Yeah.
is not what I'm seeing.
Yes.
And by statute, the attorney general provides all legal services to state
Mm,
agencies, and unless he or she says they have a conflict, in which case they can pay,
mm,
for outside counsel. And there are a whole bunch of outside lawyers now hanging around the UVA. I mean, the board has Debevoise Plimpton doing something,
mm,
and McGuire Woods is doing an investigation, um, and the AG is not zealously defending the university's academic freedom
mm, mm,
or its freedom from political interference.
mm.
He's not standing up and saying, "I'm sorry, you can't take away our federal funds unless you go through a process where you prove we've done something wrong."
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. And I had the education, all the education institutions in my area when I was in the AG's office, and so I was the lead lawyer for all of the education institutions, and I was the lead lawyer in the VMI case because we were defending VMI's right to say single gender because that was our job.
Mm.
It was our
Wow.
job. Whether
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I to this day believe that if we had been able to argue the case the way we wanted to, although through happenstance and circumstance we ended up getting out,
Mm,
we would have maybe fought that case to a 4-4 tie instead of a 8-0 loser.
mm,
But in any event, the job of the attorney general, unless you can opine in good conscience and with integrity that defending a law that's patently unconstitutional is
mm,
not your job, right?
mm,
If there was an argument and it was a reasonable argument and the institution or the agency wanted you to make it, then like any other client they had a right to ask you to do that.
yeah.
And what's happened at UVA and George Mason, to his credit, George Washington, I mean President
Yeah.
his
George.
name isn't George.
Yeah.
President Washington at George Mason has gotten himself a good lawyer,
Yeah.
and that lawyer's defending him as an individual,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he's paying for that lawyer or it's pro bono,
Yeah.
but the university is not being defended in the sense of its academic freedom and its important future uh, separation from any kind of
Mhm,
politically driven decision making.
mhm.
It's so I really I I really think that it's time for an attorney general who understands what his job is and what his job is not. And I don't
Well,
think that Jason Miyares is that guy.
you think that Jay Jones is that guy for the
I
new
think Jay
job?
Jones is that guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And let me just give us your pitch. Why are you thinking Jay Jones is the guy, and why we need to change?
Well, I mean, obviously he's got the background
Mhm.
and the legal background and otherwise to do a good job as the head lawyer, right,
Sure.
of the firm. He understands what the job is. He he is committed to um, doing the civil rights work that the office is supposed to be doing, which Jason Miyares is clearly not.
Mhm.
I don't believe he would sign a letter to the ABA saying, please stop, you know, looking at law schools from the perspective of whether they're inclusive or not.
Yeah.
Um, he would join other attorneys general in lawsuits that are meant to constrain the worst
Mhm.
aspects of the current federal administration, where it is, threatening and blackmailing universities all over the country, including in Virginia. Even if I had no other argument, the fact that he would stand up against the current federal administration would be enough for me. And Mr. Meares is clearly not that.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to make this about the criminal side of things because, I'll be honest with you, this conversation has really enlightened me on kind of how I should be looking at the AGs. I've never worked there. I always wanted an opportunity to, but I came out of law school with a lot of debt. I did my service at the public defender's office, and I got 2 kids, but it's just hard. I wish public servants got more money. I mean, it's a hard way to live life. But when I hear Meares talk about, he said Jay Jones is soft on crime and all this, and then I see his own party leader pardons 1,600 people that stormed the Capitol. There was a recent case here in Culpeper where Trump, for some reason, felt the need to pardon a former sheriff that was giving out badges for cash.
Right. Yep.
The only thing Meares said was, I knew the case, I wouldn't have given a pardon. Not even a rebuke, an outright rebuke.
No, there's no, and I think that's the thing that concerns me most. Is there's no room for independent thought.
Sure.
And there's no, if you are a person who thinks independently, then you get maggoted. In the sense of, that's a new verb, I think, that happens. But in this case, the AG writes opinions. So he wrote an opinion that said university boards of visitors are not obligated to the institution. They're obligated to the quote, the Constitution, the Commonwealth. Well, they're not. That's, there's an old opinion by Jerry Beliles that, blows all kind of holes in that. But he literally wrote this opinion that said this one line that says in some section of the code that talks about how board members should be educated means that their loyalty is to the people of the Commonwealth and not to the institution. Well, it's not cut and dried one way or the other. The reality is, as members of the Board of Visitors of a public institution, yes, at some level, the public is not beyond their scope of vision, but they have a fiduciary obligation because the university is all corporate entities as well. And they have a fiduciary obligation to act in the best interests of the institution. And he basically told him, oh, no, that's not your job. And then he told him that the personification of the Commonwealth is the governor. So even though the statute, there's a really interesting difference in the statute about board appointments. When the governor makes a board appointment to something like the Board of Health, he can fire them for failing to follow a, quote, lawful directive of the governor. That is not a grounds for firing somebody from a university board.
Sure.
University board, he has to write an opinion, which is unreviewable and not subject to any kind of judicial oversight, but he at least has to articulate a reason that is malfeasance in office, and it's not, I didn't do what the governor told me to, which is the way he can fire the head of the, the Board of Health. So, what Jason did in his opinion was try to change that balance so the governor could literally direct on a day-to-day basis what these members of the boards do, even at odds with the best interests of the institution, or so that's a problem. Jay Jones is not soft on crime. What Jay Jones understands, and you understand, having been a defense lawyer, is that the way you prevent crime is you prevent poverty.
Yes.
The way you prevent crime is you prevent educational failure. There are all kinds of things you do to prevent crime that you can call soft or feminine or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But the reality is, prevention of crime is not something that happens at the end of the road in a prison.
And anybody that sincerely cared about criminal justice would know enough to ask that question, rather than just, if it bleeds, it leads. That's basic MAGA politics. And it's just, it's disappointing as a lawyer to see our top lawyer behaving in that way. But
Mhm.
is there anything else that you think would be useful that I haven't asked you for the folks that stuck around this long?
Yeah, no, I think I just think it's important for people to realize the power the AG has, and
Yeah.
it's not just the power of the bully pulpit. It's not just the choice of cases that
Mhm,
he or she chooses to, or the amicus briefs that he or she chooses to sign.
mhm,
It is really about how they run that huge law firm
mhm,
and what kind of people they hire and what they tell those people
mhm,
how, what to do, and how seriously they take their obligations to the people of the Commonwealth to protect their consumer interests and their civil rights. And this AG shows zero inclination to protect the civil rights or human rights or consumer
mhm,
rights of Virginians, and
mhm,
that should be a firing.
mhm.
That should lead us to decide to fire him.
Yeah, and that's we get to hold the pink slip, so that with your vote. So,
Yep,
um,
absolutely.
look, I appreciate your time, Claire, and I stick on when I stick around after I hit the end button. But what I'm
Okay.
gonna do is I will post your article or your op-ed in the show notes so
Oh,
people
that'd
can
be
access
great.
that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Um, is there any in case they have questions for you, do you have any place you'd prefer them reaching out to you? Um,
Yeah, they can reach out to me at Claire at
mhm.
changeservant.com.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'll post that in the show notes as well. But thank you so much. Thank you for all the work
You're
you're doing.
welcome. All
And
right.
I
Well,
see
thank
I
you.
see
I
on
enjoyed
LinkedIn,
it.
it looks like you guys are doing great on the private side too. So I like what
Well, I really love our law firm. We're
yeah.
doing some interesting things and trying to recast the way people think about what law firms do and how we value our services.
Oh, I love it. All right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit
All
end.
right.